3:14 a.m., 12 nautical miles west of the Strait of Hormuz entrance. USS Farragut, an Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyer, just entered the Persian Gulf after a clean 40-minute straight transit. The transit was over. The crew had begun standing down from heightened alert, and at 3:14:07 a.m., an Iranian coastal battery fired 2 Qader anti-ship missiles directly at her from the northern shoreline. The transit was not over. Welcome to Navy Beacon, where we break down the operations that define sea power. There is a moment in every Strait of Hormuz transit where a commanding officer allows herself to believe the hardest part is done. The strait itself, the narrow, constrained, radar clutter-filled choke point where Iranian territory dominates the northern edge, is the recognized high-threat window. Ships go to heightened alert when they enter. They breathe a fraction easier when they come out the western end into the broader waters of the Gulf. That psychological transition, that fractional relaxation of vigilance, is something the IRGC had studied and documented. Their observation posts along the coast logged U.S. Navy behavior. They tracked not just ship positions and speeds, but watch patterns, communication frequencies, the timing of radar mode changes that indicated alert level shifts. They had noticed the pattern. The battery that attacked USS Farragut was not positioned on the strait's narrow coastline. It was positioned 12 nautical miles west of the strait's western entrance, just far enough into the Gulf that a transiting ship would have lowered its guard, reallocated its fire control watch, and begun the administrative process of transitioning from straight transit alert posture to Gulf patrol posture. The battery had been operational for 4 months, concealed in the terrain of the low coastal hills north of the Gulf's western approach. It had been positioned there specifically to attack ships at the moment of their lowest alert, not in the strait, where U.S. ships expected the threat, but just past it, where they did not. USS Farragut's commanding officer, Commander David Reyes, had been a surface warfare officer for 11 years. He knew the statistics. He had read the threat assessments. He had briefed his crew on the IRGC's demonstrated ability to study patterns. He had not lowered his alert posture after the strait exit. He was still on the bridge. He heard the SLQ-32 alarm before the watch officer called it out. USS Farragut's AN/SLQ-32V 3 electronic warfare system detected 2 simultaneous fire control radar activations at 3:14:07 a.m. Both emissions were classified automatically from the system's threat library: Iranian coastal defense radar, targeting band, signal strength indicating active engagement mode. 2 separate emitters, 1 bearing, both from the north-northwest, both aimed at the ship. The alarm went to the bridge and CIC simultaneously. The automatic classification appeared on Lieutenant Commander Sarah Kim's tactical display in CIC before she had processed the sound of the alarm. Hostile fire control radar. 2 emitters, bearing 347. Signal classification, NOR/Qader guidance band. 2 emitters meant 2 missiles, or 4, or more. Kim called it at 3:14:09 a.m., 2 seconds after the alarm. Bridge, CIC. 2 hostile fire control radar contacts, bearing 347. Recommend immediate general quarters. Commander Reyes was already keying the 1MC. General quarters. All hands man your battle stations. Missile warning, 2 emitters, north-northwest. This is not a drill. Time 3:14:11 a.m. 4 seconds from detection to ship-wide alarm. The first missiles appeared on the AN/SPY-1D radar at 3:14:16 a.m., 5 seconds after the alarm. 2 contacts, sea skimming altitude, bearing 349, inbound at high subsonic speed. Flight profile consistent with Qader, approximately 7 meters above the surface. Active radar seeker, estimated warhead 300 kilograms. Flight time to impact from current range of 31 nautical miles, 94 seconds. 90 seconds of warning, 2 300-kilogram warheads, 1 destroyer. The Qader is Iran's most capable coastal anti-ship missile, and the one that U.S. Navy surface warfare officers spend the most time studying. It is not simply a copy of an older design. It is a weapon that reflects 20 years of Iranian engineering investment aimed at solving a specific problem. How do you defeat the layered missile defense of an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer? The solution the Iranians developed is elegant in its engineering and deeply concerning in its implications. The Qader uses a combination of low-altitude sea-skimming flight to minimize radar detection range, an active radar seeker, that operates autonomously in the terminal phase without requiring shore-based guidance, and an infrared backup channel that activates in the final approach to defeat chaff countermeasures that might fool the primary radar seeker. At 7 meters above the Gulf surface, the missile's radar return merges with sea clutter, the electromagnetic noise generated by radar energy bouncing off wave faces, in the final approach phase. In the Persian Gulf's night sea state at this time of year, the significant wave height was approximately 1.5 meters, generating enough clutter in the 2 to 10 meter altitude band to partially mask a Qader's radar return from a defending ship's fire control radar. The fire control solution fed to USS Farragut's SM-2 standard missiles would be built on a slightly degraded track, and there were 2 of them. Lieutenant Commander Kim had the fire control allocation done in 30 seconds. 2 SM, 2 Block 3B rounds assigned to the first contact, 2 assigned to the second. 4 missiles total, launched in rapid succession from the Mark 41 VLS forward. The first SM-2 left its cell at 3:14:41 a.m., 30 seconds after the first radar detection, 64 seconds before the Qaders would arrive. The second launched 3 seconds later, the third 4 seconds after that, the fourth 1 second behind the third. 4 SM-2s climbing at Mach 3.5, each seeking one of the 2 incoming Qaders. USS Farragut was simultaneously maneuvering. Commander Reyes had called a sharp starboard turn the moment the missiles were detected, putting the ship on a heading that increased the angular rate of change and forced the incoming missiles' guidance systems to continuously update their aim points. At 27 knots on a turning course, the destroyer was a moving target with a constantly shifting aspect. The first SM-2 intercepted the lead Qader at 20 nautical miles from USS Farragut. Clean detonation. The fragmentation pattern from the SM-2's warhead tore through the Qader's fuselage at closing speed. The missile's propulsion stopped. The warhead did not detonate. The wreckage fell into the Gulf. The second SM-2 went after the trailing Qader. The trailing Qader had been flying 4 seconds behind the lead missile, a deliberate separation designed to ensure that the defending ship's fire control system was still tracking the first missile when the second arrived at a range where engagement time was minimal. The second SM-2 acquired the trailing Qader's radar return at 23 nautical miles and flew its intercept vector. The sea clutter masking that had been predicted in the threat assessment materialized at 18 nautical miles. The AN/SPY-1D lost track of the trailing Qader for 1.4 seconds as the missile flew through a sea clutter shadow, a temporary masking effect created by the geometry of the radar beam, the missile's altitude, and the wave pattern beneath it. 1.4 seconds. The second SM-2's guidance received a gap. The missile detonated at the calculated intercept point. The Qader was not there. It had covered 340 meters during the track gap, and its actual position was 340 meters further along its flight path than the fire control solution had calculated. The SM-2 detonated in empty air. The Qader flew through. The third and fourth SM-2S had been launched as the primary salvos. They were now the backup engagement against the still inbound missile. The third SM-2, with a fresh track established after the clutter gap, had a better solution. It closed on the Qader at 15 nautical miles. The proximity fuse triggered. The detonation was close, not close enough. The fragmentation sphere from the SM-2's warhead extended approximately 12 meters in radius from the detonation center. The Qader passed through the outer edge of the sphere, 7 meters from the center. The outer edge of the fragmentation radius at 7 meters is where fragment density begins to drop below the threshold required for reliable airframe damage. The Qader took 3 fragments. 1 hit the forward fuselage, 1 hit the port wing root, 1 passed through the afterbody without striking anything critical. 3 fragments, out of the hundreds in the SM-2's warhead pattern. 3. The missile kept flying. The fourth SM-2 hit the Qader at 9 nautical miles from USS Farragut. This was not a miss. The detonation was centered, the fragmentation was dense, and the Qader's forward fuselage was destroyed by the pattern. The active radar seeker stopped transmitting. The warhead fuse was severed from its arming circuit. But 3 things happened simultaneously as the Qader came apart at 9 nautical miles. The propulsion system was still firing when the fuselage broke up. The engine, separated from the airframe, continued on its vector for a fraction of a second before tumbling. The warhead, 300 kilograms of hardened steel casing containing high explosive now separated from its fuse, was a ballistic object moving at high subsonic speed toward USS Farragut's position. A 300-kilogram inert steel object is not a detonating warhead. It is also not nothing. At 9 nautical miles, a ballistic object launched toward a ship covers the remaining distance in approximately 54 seconds. The Phalanx C-IWS on USS Farragut's forward mount tracked the debris field from the Qader's breakup and attempted to engage the largest piece, the warhead casing. The Phalanx's fire control radar classified the warhead casing as a valid continuing threat and fired. The burst, 1 second, 70 rounds of 20mm tungsten, hit the warhead casing and deflected it. The tumbling motion of the casing changed. The deflection was not enough to move its impact point clear of the ship. The warhead casing struck USS Farragut's forward deck at 3:16:41 a.m. at a shallow angle, a grazing impact on the forward 5-inch gun mount's deck plating. The casing tumbled across the deck, struck the gun mount's access hatch, and went overboard on the port side. It did not detonate. The fuse had been destroyed in the SM-2 intercept. The high explosive was intact but undetonated. The casing sank. The impact with the deck and the gun mount access hatch was not gentle. The 300-kilogram steel casing, traveling at several hundred meters per second even after the Phalanx deflection, struck the deck with enough force to dent the deck plating, crack the gun mount's access hatch mounting, and generate a shockwave that knocked 3 sailors off their feet in the forward areas. Damage Controlman Second Class. Ana Ortega was coming through the forward hatch when the casing hit. The impact threw her against the internal bulkhead. She sustained a broken collarbone and a concussion. She was conscious and coherent when the medical team reached her 40 seconds later. 2 other sailors in the forward area sustained minor injuries from falling. Bruises, 1 sprained wrist. No one died. USS Farragut's forward gun mount was inoperative due to the access hatch damage. Both Phalanx mounts were operational. The ship's propulsion and sensors were entirely unaffected. From the moment the fire control radars activated to the moment the warhead casing went overboard was 2 minutes and 34 seconds. In those 2 minutes and 34 seconds, USS Farragut had fired 4 SM-2 Standard missiles. Her Phalanx had fired a burst. 3 sailors had been injured, and a 300-kilogram warhead casing had bounced across her forward deck. The strike response was already in motion. Commander Reyes had transmitted the flash at 3:14:22 a.m., 11 seconds after detecting the fire control radars, while the SM-2S were still in the air. The message was precise. 2 Qader missiles inbound, engaging SM-2. Battery position bearing 347 from my position, requesting immediate airstrike. Radar positions being fixed. USS Farragut's own electronic warfare system had been direction finding on the 2 Iranian fire control radars from the moment of detection. The radars had been active for 17 seconds before going to emissions control after the missile launches. Standard IRGC procedure. 17 seconds of emission had been enough for the SLQ-32 to generate a position fix accurate to approximately 1.5 nautical miles. Not precise enough for a direct strike, precise enough to cue the P-8 Poseidon. The P-8 maritime patrol aircraft assigned to the Strait approach sector had been operating at 8,000 feet, 42 nautical miles south. When the flash arrived, the P-8 crew vectored immediately toward the direction-finding position, an area of coastal hills north of the Gulf's western approach. The P-8 arrived over the target area at 3:21:14 a.m., 7 minutes after the missile launch. The fire control radar vehicles had gone silent but not gone cold. 2 diesel trucks operating their power generation systems to support a missile launch and fire control radar emit enough heat to be visible on a modern FLIR sensor for between 18 and 25 minutes after operation. The P-8's FLIR camera found both vehicles within 90 seconds of arriving over the area. Both were on a coastal road, heading northeast toward a terrain fold that would have provided concealment in another 3 to 4 minutes. Authorization request, 3:22:31 a.m. 2 FA-18F Super Hornets, Hawk 21 and Hawk 22, had launched from USS Theodore Roosevelt at 3:17 a.m., 6 minutes after the missile detection, on the presumption that a strike authorization would be forthcoming. The F/A-18 crews had been on Alert 5. The launch had been initiated by the Roosevelt's operations officer on his own authority, not anticipating the authorization, but understanding that arriving over target without weapons and waiting for authorization was better than sitting on deck while the window closed. Flight time from Roosevelt to the target area, 11 minutes. The aircraft arrived at 3:28 a.m., Authorization returned at 3:25 a.m., 13 minutes after the request. By the time authorization came through, the aircraft were already 3 minutes from the target area. The P-8 had been tracking both vehicle contacts continuously. Both were still on the road. Both were 1 minute from the terrain fold. Hawk 21 fired an AGM-65 Maverick at the lead vehicle at 3:28:14 a.m., 17 seconds after arriving over the area. The infrared seeker had locked the vehicle's engine heat from 2 miles out during the inbound run. The missile covered the distance in 11 seconds, direct hit. The vehicle, a heavy truck carrying the primary fire control radar, was destroyed. The secondary explosion from the vehicle's power generation equipment and any residual propellant from the missile system's launch support equipment expanded the fireball to a radius visible from 5 miles. Hawk 22 engaged the second vehicle 12 seconds later with a second Maverick. Hit. The second vehicle stopped, caught fire, and its fuel tank exploded. Both vehicles were destroyed by 3:28:38 a.m. The aircraft then turned their attention to the fixed infrastructure. USS Farragut's direction-finding position, accurate to 1.5 nautical miles, covered an area that the P-8 had refined further during its 7-minute observation window. The FLIR had identified a concrete structure on a coastal rise approximately 400 meters from the road where the vehicles had been operating. A concrete structure in that terrain, in that location, was not a natural formation. Hawk 21 put a GBU-38 500-pound JDAM on the structure. Direct hit. The structure collapsed. Secondary explosion from inside indicated stored propellant or electronics equipment. Hawk 22 swept the surrounding area with the FLIR. A second, smaller structure, partially camouflaged under netting, showed a rectangular thermal signature indicating enclosed electronics. A second GBU-38 hit. The netting burned away as the structure collapsed. The two FA-18s made a final pass at low altitude and confirmed no additional thermal contacts in the target area before aggressing south at 3:32 a.m. Total time from the IRGC's missile launch to the destruction of the battery infrastructure, 18 minutes and 22 seconds. USS Farragut completed her transit into the Persian Gulf patrol area and continued her assigned mission. The forward gun mount was inoperative due to the access hatch damage. A maintenance team from Bahrain Naval Support Activity arrived by helicopter at 7:30 a.m. with replacement components and completed the repair by 11:45 a.m. DC-2. Ortega was medevaxed by the same helicopter. Her broken collarbone was set at Bahrain Naval Medical Center. She was returned to the ship 14 days later. The 3 other injured sailors were treated aboard and returned to duty within 48 hours. USS Farragut submitted her after-action report at 8 a.m. The after-action review produced findings that the 5th Fleet Commander forwarded to the Chief of Naval Operations with a personal cover note. Finding 1 addressed the post-strait alert posture problem. The battery had been positioned west of the strait specifically to exploit the behavioral pattern of U.S. ships lowering their alert posture after transit. Commander Reyes's decision to maintain full alert posture through the post-strait entry phase had been the enabling factor in the crew's rapid response. The review recommended formalizing the post-strait maintained alert window, defining a minimum 30-minute full alert period after strait exit before any posture reduction, as a standing requirement rather than a commanding officer's discretionary decision. Finding 2 addressed the clutter gap miss, the 1.4-second sea clutter masking event that caused the second SM-2 to miss the trailing Qader, was logged as the 3rd documented occurrence of this specific failure mode in the Persian Gulf's night sea state environment. The software update to the AN/SPY-1D's clutter compensation algorithm, which had been recommended in 2 previous after-action reviews, had been developed and approved, but was still awaiting a deployment scheduling window. The review recommended immediate fleet-wide emergency deployment of the update rather than scheduled installation. The deployment was completed across all Gulf-assigned ships within 3 weeks. Finding 3 addressed the Warhead casing impact. When the 4th SM-2 destroyed the Qader's guidance and fuse system, but left the warhead casing as a ballistic object, the ship faced a threat category that the standard engagement doctrine did not specifically address. The phalanx had acted correctly, engaging the largest continuing threat. The deflection had altered the casing's trajectory enough to prevent a direct center mass impact. But the doctrine for managing post-intercept debris, specifically what engagement assets to prioritize, and how to maneuver the ship to minimize exposure to ballistic debris from a destroyed missile, was underdeveloped. The review developed and published a debris management addendum to the Arleigh-Burke Air Defense Doctrine within 45 days. It was the first such addendum ever issued. Finding 4 was strategic and blunt. The IRGC battery had been in position for 4 months without being identified by any U.S. intelligence collection system. It had been built with discipline. No electronic emissions during construction, no vehicle movements during satellite overflight windows, no communications that could be intercepted and associated with military activity. It was found, ultimately, because it fired its missiles, and its radar vehicles were tracked by the P-8's FLIR in the window before they reached terrain cover. If the vehicles had reached the terrain fold 3 minutes earlier, if the P-8 had arrived 7 minutes later, both vehicles would have been hidden and would not have been engaged. The battery's fixed infrastructure would still have been struck. But the fire control radar vehicles, the components that made the battery operationally capable, would have escaped, repositioned, fired again from a different location. 3 sailors were injured. No one died. The strait stayed open. Next time, the window might be 2 minutes shorter. Stay vigilant. Stay informed. This is Navy Beacon, and we'll see you in the next one.